Welcome to day 108 of 66 and 26. We're in Job 21 to 24 today, where the conversation between Job and his friends sharpens. Up to this point in Job, we've seen that Job's friends are working with a simple assumption. Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So if Job is suffering, he must be a bad person. And Eliphaz, Job's friend, says this out loud. Job 22, verse 5, "Is not your wickedness great? Are not your sins endless?" And then verse 10, "That is why snares are all around you, why sudden peril terrifies you." In other words, Job, this is your fault. Now, this is what Martin Luther later called a theology of glory. The idea that you could look at outward circumstances and assume that you know what's going on with God. So if good things are happening, that must mean that that person is good and doing everything right. And if someone is suffering, then God is not with them. As one of my pastors once said, however, he said, that might be good karma, but it's terrible theology. And we actually see, and Job speaks about this in these chapters, that sometimes the wicked prosper. They have long, comfortable lives, and sometimes the righteous suffer, which is what happens in the book of Job. Just look to the cross of Jesus. We see that the righteous one, perfectly righteous one, suffers terribly. And what looks like defeat and suffering is actually the work of God to bring salvation to the world. And that's what Martin Luther called the theology of the cross, that God is doing something hidden, and it sometimes seems upside down, backwards. What God is doing to bless feels like suffering, and that's what we see in the cross of Jesus. And so as we're reading through Job 21 to 24 today, we should remember that you can't draw a straight line between what is happening that's right in someone's life and assume that that means God's favor. And if they're suffering, that must mean God's punishment or judgment. It doesn't work that cleanly. And we should remember that God's ways are always higher than our ways. Isaiah says this, Isaiah 55, God's thoughts are higher than our thoughts, his ways higher than our ways. Paul talks about this in Romans chapter 11, how God's ways are unsearchable. Job says this in his reply to Eliphaz, and he says in chapter 23 that he searches for God east, west, north, and south, and he cannot find God. He can't see where God is working, and yet God sees him. But he knows the way that I take, and when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. So when we search for God, we can't see what he's doing in our lives through our suffering and the challenges that we face in this life. We can trust, as Job trusted, that God is at work and God knows our ways. He knows our life, and nothing is ever hidden from his sight.